SIL left her baby on our doorstep before my wedding with a note. Found out my fiancé knew about it and lied to me for months. So I called off the wedding when she told me everything. Okay, so here we go. I called off my wedding on the day of my wedding. It has been a few weeks since the whole thing went down, and I am still trying to make some sense of it. I need to put it all out there and see if I'm crazy for how I reacted or if anyone else in my shoes would have done the same. For some background, I, 34F, was engaged to J, 34M, and things had been going pretty well for the most part. We had been together for a few years, and while we had our ups and downs like any couple, I genuinely thought we were solid. We had been planning our wedding for what felt like forever, and while the stress of planning was starting to weigh on me, I was still excited. I thought once the wedding was done, we could settle into married life and get back to focusing on each other. Then there's Jay's sister, Sandra, 38F. I always had a weird feeling about her. Sandra is one of those people who always seems to be in the middle of some drama or another. She has never had her life fully together, and while I do not like to judge, it always felt like she was bringing some kind of chaos into the family. I tried to be cordial with her over the years for Jay's sake, but we never really clicked. There was always tension, but I figured that is just how some in-laws are, right? You cannot choose your partner's family, after all. And more importantly, Jay is a very family-oriented guy, so basically, I had no other option. I just went along with how things were. So fast forward to about 5 months ago. Jay and I were in the middle of wedding planning invites, seating charts, tastings, all of that fun and stressful stuff. I remember feeling overwhelmed but still excited that we were getting closer to the big day. And then, out of nowhere, everything completely changed. It was late one night, and we were relaxing at home after a long day of wedding preparation. There was a sudden knock on the door. Jay went and opened the door, and he found a baby there. A literal baby, in a car seat, was sitting on our doorstep. And there was a note with the baby. I remember standing there in complete shock, struggling to process what was going on. At first, I figured it was some kind of sick prank. But, no, the note explained everything, and it was sent by Sandra. Apparently, she could not take care of her baby any longer and decided to leave him with us. She did not ask if we were okay with it. She did not warn us. She just left her 6-month-old baby on our doorstep with a note demanding us to look after him because she could not anymore. I did not know what to say. I mean, who does that? Who just leaves their baby on someone's doorstep like that? And why us? Why now? We were days away from our wedding, and suddenly, we were supposed to take in a baby. I was completely blindsided. Jay, on the other hand, reacted very differently. He immediately went into we have to do the right thing mode. He kept saying that we could not just abandon the baby and that we needed to step up because we were family. I understand, trust me, I do. But this was not our baby. We did not agree to this, and it felt kind of like Sandra had just basically dumped all of her troubles on us with no regard for how they would affect us. I was not even ready to have my own child. How was I supposed to take care of someone else's kid? I did not want to be cruel, and I know the baby was innocent in all of this, but I also was not prepared to become a mother overnight, especially not in the middle of planning a wedding. It felt like too much, and I told Jay as much. But he kept insisting that we had no choice, that it was only temporary until Sandra got back on her feet. I did not have the energy to argue, and I did not want to be the bad guy, so I went along with it. For the next 3 months, we were suddenly parents to a baby we had not planned for. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare. I was completely overwhelmed. We had no idea how to take care of a baby. My entire life became about diapers, bottles, and sleepless nights. I was not eating right. I was not sleeping. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I thought about the wedding, I wanted to scream because I could not focus on anything other than just trying to survive day to day with this baby. Jay, meanwhile, was not as helpful as I thought he would be. He kept saying we would figure it out and that things would get easier, but he was not really stepping up the way I needed him to. I felt like I was taking full responsibility for the child. He would help here and there, but I was the one who was getting up in the middle of the night, the one who was dealing with the crying and the feeding. I was exhausted, and the resentment started to build. I kept telling myself that this was temporary, that once the wedding was over, maybe things would calm down. Maybe Sandra would come back and take responsibility for her child, and Jay and I could finally focus on our marriage. But as the weeks passed, that hope faded, and Sandra was nowhere to be found. And then came the wedding day. Though I tried to ignore it, I was still feeling a mixture of exhaustion and resentment. It was supposed to be our day. I wanted to think that after the wedding, things would get better, so I tried to keep my attention on the fact that we had come this far. But, of course, nothing ever goes smoothly when Sandra is involved. So, I am getting ready in my bridal suite, surrounded by friends and family, attempting to be calm and avoid thinking about the baby's situation. And guess who walks in out of nowhere? Sandra. She casually walked into the bridal suite as if nothing was wrong, as if she had not dropped her baby off at our door 3 months ago and vanished. I just could not believe it. This woman's audacity to show up on my wedding day and act as if nothing had happened was unbelievable. I was already on edge, and seeing her only added to my anxiety. I took her aside and confronted her, questioning what was going on, why she thought it was appropriate to leave her kid with us like that, and when she planned to return and accept responsibility for her child. That is when everything changed. Sandra, with a smug expression on her face, just dropped a bombshell that completely crushed me. She informed me that Jay was aware of the situation the entire time. He knew what was going on. This was not a last-minute drop-off where she had no other options. Jay and Sandra had discussed it before, and Jay had agreed to take the child in. He knew for weeks before she arrived at our door, but he did not tell me because he knew I would not agree to it. I felt like my whole world came crashing down on me. All along, I had been convincing myself that we were in a crisis and that we were all in this together. But Jay had made a huge decision concerning our lives without ever asking me. He had agreed to take in a baby without first asking me how I felt. He lied to me, plain and simple. I felt so betrayed and hurt. All those sleepless nights, all that stress, were caused by Jay's decision to make this major decision without me even knowing about it. I could not believe it. I knew right away that I could not go through with the wedding. I could not marry someone who did not respect me enough to be honest with me. I could not marry someone who believed it was acceptable to make life-altering decisions without first discussing them with me. So, I made my decision. I walked out of the bridal suite while still dressed casually. I had not even put on my wedding dress yet. I did not really care. I was not going ahead with it anyway. When I walked out to where the ceremony was supposed to take place, everyone's reactions were unmatched. They were all expecting this beautiful wedding, but instead, I simply let them know that the wedding would not take place. There was a collective gasp, and everyone began whispering, clearly confused. But I did not care. I was done with it. When people began asking questions, I told them the truth. I gave my explanations, including how Sandra had left her child with us, how Jay had lied to me and known all along, and why I could not marry someone who would do such a thing. The entire room went silent. Jay stood there, stunned as if he could not believe I was actually calling off the wedding. I grabbed my stuff and left. I did not stay for any of the awkward after effects. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove away. I remember sitting in my car, feeling both relieved and devastated. I was heartbroken when the relationship ended, but I also knew I could not marry someone I could not trust. However, I feel slightly guilty about how I handled the situation. I feel like I overreacted when I broke up with Jay in front of everyone at the wedding. Maybe I should have handled things differently. Maybe I could have waited until after the ceremony was over to address the situation, but I do not think I would have stayed there and said my vows knowing what I knew. But I need to know, Ida, for calling off my wedding and breaking up with my fiancé in front of everyone after finding out he had been lying to me about the baby? Should I have gone through with the wedding and dealt with it later, or did I do the right thing by walking away? Update 1. So, it has been a month and a half since I called off my wedding, and I have had a lot of time to reflect on what happened. I am still not sure if I handled it the best way, but I guess I will start with what has been going on since. First off, after I walked out of the wedding, I went to stay with my best friend for a few days. I was completely numb. I think the shock of everything had not even worn off yet. I remember feeling like my entire life had just flipped upside down in a matter of minutes. I could not wrap my head around the fact that the man I was supposed to marry had been keeping such a huge secret from me. It was like everything I thought I knew about him was just wrong. In those first few days, I did not talk to Jay at all. He texted me a couple of times, saying he wanted to explain, but I honestly could not deal with it. I needed space to think and figure out what I wanted. I was not ready to hear any more excuses. I mean, how do you even begin to process the fact that the person you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with was willing to keep something so massive from you? I could not shake the feeling that if he could lie about this, what else could he be hiding? After about a week, Jay sent me a longer message. He apologized again and said he wanted to meet up to talk. Part of me wanted to hear him out, but another part of me did not care anymore. I was exhausted and emotionally drained, and I honestly did not think anything he said would help. He had already shown me who he was, and I was not sure I could trust him ever again. However, I eventually agreed to meet with him. We met at a coffee shop, and the whole situation was awkward. He looked awful, like he had not slept in days, and I am sure I did not look any better. We sat down and he began explaining his side of the story. He said he knew what Sandra did was wrong, but he felt like he had to step up because she was family. He said he did not tell me because he did not want to burden me with more stress on top of the wedding planning. He kept saying he thought it would only be temporary and that Sandra would come back for the baby soon. I listened to him, but I could not shake the feeling that he was just making excuses. I get that family is important, but we were supposed to be a team. He made this massive decision without me and expected me to just go along with it. It was not even about the baby, really it was about the fact that he did not trust me enough to be honest. If we were supposed to be partners, how could he not include me in something so life-changing? I told him that, and he seemed genuinely sorry, but I could tell he did not fully get it. He kept saying that he thought he was doing the right thing, that he was just trying to protect me. But I did not need protection, I needed him to be honest. I needed to be involved in decision-making, and he denied me the chance to participate. It was not only about the baby. It was about how he did not respect me enough to tell me the truth. After that conversation, I realized that there was no turning back. Even if I wanted to forgive him, I knew I would never truly trust him again. The damage had been done, and I did not want to spend the rest of my life wondering what he was hiding from me. So, I told him that I could not be with him anymore. He did not take it well, but he did not fight me about it either. I think he knew it was over. Since then, we have had minimal contact. He is still taking care of the baby, but Sandra is nowhere to be found. I honestly do not know what is going to happen with that situation. Part of me feels bad for the baby because it is not his fault, but at the same time, I cannot be involved in that mess anymore. I am trying to move on with my life, and I do not want to get sucked back into the drama. Sandra, on the other hand, has disappeared entirely. Jay has not been able to contact her, and no one knows where she is. It is as if she disappeared from the face of the earth. I am still angry with her for abandoning her child and expecting us to clean up her mess, but I am more upset with Jay for going along with it. Instead of taking a stand for us and our future, he allowed Sandra's mess to become our problem. In the weeks since the wedding, I have had a lot of support from my friends and family. They've all been pretty understanding of why I did what I did, but there is still that nagging feeling that maybe I could have handled things differently. Maybe I should have waited until after the wedding to confront Jay, or maybe I could have found a way to work through it instead of blowing up everything on the spot. But then again, I do not know if I could have stood there and said my vows, knowing what I knew. It would have felt like a lie, and I do not want to start a marriage on a foundation of dishonesty. I am not going to lie, it has been really hard. There are days when I feel like I made the right decision, and then there are days when I miss Jay and wonder if I overreacted. But deep down, I know that I could not marry someone I did not fully trust. Trust is everything in a relationship, and once it is broken, it is so hard to get it back. It is weird, but in some ways, I feel like I am rediscovering who I am outside of the relationship. For so long, I was so focused on being Jay's fiancé that I kind of lost sight of who I was as an individual. But even though I am trying to move ahead, there is still a part of me that feels robbed. I had my entire future planned out, and now it is just gone. I never imagined that I would be 34, single, and starting over, but here I am. It is a scary feeling, but I am trying to remain positive. I know I made the right decision for myself, even if it is difficult right now. Update 2. Hey everyone, it has been a while since my last update, and I have had some time to process everything that has happened. It has been a mix of emotions, and while I still do not have all the answers, I wanted to share what has been going on lately, especially since so many of you asked for more backstory about my relationship with Jay. So, Jay and I had been together for just over 3 years before our wedding disaster. I always believed we had a solid relationship. We met in college, and his kindness and sense of humor drew me in right away. But we started dating years after meeting. He was the type of boyfriend who would go out of his way to make me feel special, whether by planning surprise dates or simply being available when I needed someone to talk to. We had a great time together, and I appreciated how supportive he was of my career and goals. I thought we were on the same page about most things, especially family and future plans. But, looking back, I see some red flags that I ignored. For example, he never set clear boundaries with his sister, Sandra. There was always proof that she was a bit of a handful, constant drama in her life, questionable choices, and a tendency to rely on others rather than take responsibility for herself. I thought Jay was just being a good brother by assisting her, so I tried not to judge him. I believed he had good intentions, and it seemed like a small price to pay to keep the family together. But I never expected it to get so bad and turn into the situation we found ourselves in. Fast forward to now. After I walked away from the wedding, things went pretty quiet for a while. Jay focused on taking care of the baby, which I did not want to be part of anymore. But then, out of nowhere, Sandra resurfaced. I was not prepared for it, and honestly, it felt like a slap in the face. I got a text from Jay one afternoon asking if I could meet up because he needed to talk about something important. Naturally, I was a bit nervous, but I figured it might be about the baby or how things were going with Sandra, who was nowhere to be found since she dumped her kid on us. When we met up, he seemed really anxious. We sat down, and I asked about Sandra before he could begin to explain. He told me she had recently returned to town and was looking for a way to get her life back on track. I thought that was a bit ironic considering she had just thrown her responsibilities on us without a second thought. But what really surprised me was when he said she wanted to meet with both of us. She apparently thought we could all sit down and talk things out as if everything that happened was just a small setback. Jay looked hopeful, like he thought this was a good idea. I, on the other hand, was not excited about the prospect of meeting her again. After everything that happened, how could I trust her to not pull another stunt? I told Jay I was not sure about it, and he insisted that we meet her. I could see he was torn. He wanted to be supportive of his sister but also seemed to realize the mess she created. I felt bad because I knew he was just trying to do the right thing, but I could not shake the feeling that it was a terrible idea. Then, a few days later, Sandra actually called me. I was taken aback when I saw her name pop up on my phone. I thought about ignoring it, but something made me pick up. She went on about how she realized she messed up and wanted to make amends, not just with Jay but with me too. She mentioned how much she missed having family around and how she was trying to change. Part of me felt like this was just another ploy to get me back on her good side, but another part of me was curious to see what she had to say. She was smooth, I will give her that. She suggested we all meet at a neutral place, like a cafe, where she would explain everything and answer any questions we had. In all honesty, it sounded like an emotional trap. But Jay pushed hard for it, saying it could be a chance for all of us to get better. So, despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet. It felt strange. I was still adjusting to the idea of being single again and not having to deal with Sandra's antics, but here I was, preparing for another round. The day of the meeting arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I arrived at the cafe early to clear my head. I had no idea what to expect, but I was prepared to stand my ground if things got weird. Jay seemed nervous when he arrived. We both knew Sandra had a talent for manipulation, and we had no idea how this meeting would turn out. When Sandra finally walked in, she had this almost rehearsed look on her face. She smiled like she was genuinely happy to see us, but I could tell there was something off about her energy. She launched into this long story about how she realized she had made poor choices and needed to take responsibility for her actions, especially as a mother. I was a bit surprised, but at the same time, I could not help but feel skeptical. Did she really mean it, or was this all just an act to win us back? As she spoke, she mentioned how she had been trying to get her life together and had found a job. She said she was staying at her friend's place for now and was working on finding a more stable living situation. But here is the twist: she also claimed she had been thinking about coming back to reclaim her baby. I froze. My heart raced. Jay and I exchanged a glance. He looked a mix of shocked and confused, and I could feel my stomach drop. Sandra continued, saying she wanted to ease back into being a mom, but she would need help. She asked if we could help her through this transition by babysitting the baby while she got back on her feet. It felt as if she was simply throwing everything back at us as if the previous few months had never happened. Jay appeared caught off guard by this. I could see the wheels turning in his head, and I knew this would be a make or break situation for him. I finally found my voice and spoke up. I told Sandra that she could not just walk back in and expect us to drop everything again. We took care of the baby for months, and it was not fair for her to think we would be willing to take on that role again just because she decided to show up. And more importantly, it's dumb that she was expecting me to help, despite the fact that Jay and I are not even together anymore. I was not mean about it, but I was firm. I needed her to understand that I was not okay with being a backup plan. But what surprised me was Jay's reaction. He did not back me up. Instead, he paused and looked at Sandra, as if he were considering her request. It felt like a punch in the gut. I expected him to have my back, but instead, he seemed torn. I could tell he wanted to help his sister but also wanted to do right by me. I was completely confused. Did he really want to be her co-parent again after everything that had happened? I could feel the tension rising in the cafe. People around us started to look over, and I could feel the awkwardness. I did not want to cause a scene, but I could not let Sandra take advantage of us again. The conversation became chaotic, and it felt as if we were going in circles. Jay was caught in the middle, trying to please everyone, which only made matters more complicated. At that moment, I realized I still had so many feelings about Jay and how everything ended. Seeing him struggle to choose between Sandra and me brought back all those feelings of betrayal. I was not sure what this meeting meant for our future. I thought I could at least be friends with him and we could have a civil relationship, but now I was left feeling confused and unsure of what I really wanted. The whole situation left me feeling more uncertain than ever. I want to walk away from Jay and this whole mess completely. But God, it's so hard, especially with all of these feelings. The relationship between us is over, but I still love him and it's complicating things and making it impossible for me to walk away. I really need some advice. One thing that I know for sure is that I absolutely need to cut Jay off. I have to do it for myself. There is no alternative. Update 3. Hey everyone, it has been 3 months since the last update. I finally made some decisions about this situation and wanted to give an update. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for all their support and advice. It really helped me work through my feelings and figure out what I needed to do next. So, here is the deal, I have finally decided to cut ties with Jay. I know I had said in my last update that I was still struggling with my feelings for him, and it was difficult to accept the fact that I needed to let go. Everything fell apart for me after our conversation with Sandra. Seeing Jay torn between her and me felt like a gut punch, and it hit me that I was holding on to an unhealthy relationship. I had to put myself first, no matter how hard it was going to be. I knew I could not just disappear from him, I needed to let him down gently and respectfully. So, I decided to meet with him for one last time. I chose a quiet location where we could talk without interruption. I had practiced this conversation a million times in my head, but I still felt nervous. When we sat down, I started off by saying how much I cherished our time together. I reminded him of the good times we had. But then I had to get serious. I explained that after everything that had happened, particularly with Sandra and his reaction, I realized I could not trust him in the way I needed to in a relationship. I explained that I felt like I was constantly competing for his attention with his sister and that I needed to prioritize my own well-being. Jay looked surprised at first. He started saying that he never meant to make me feel like that, but I held my ground. I did not want to spend my life wondering what else he might be hiding, and not being able to trust him. As we talked, Jay tried convincing me to reconsider, saying that we could work through things together. But I did not change my mind. I told him that we both needed time to think things through on our own. I told him that I hoped he understood where I was coming from and that I only wanted the best for him and the baby. I also made it clear that I did not want to be a part of that drama anymore. We finally said our goodbyes. It felt bittersweet. I left feeling relieved and sad. I knew I had done the best thing for myself, even if it felt difficult at the time. I am sure there will be times when I miss him or get the urge to reach out, but I am set to stick to my decision.